Welcome back. Today we're going to talk about some factors that help TCKs overcome the challenges and walk in and gain the benefits. And so we're going to go ahead and just jump right in. One of the main factors that can help TCKs immensely is a loving, caring, warm, welcoming, and understanding family, especially mom and dad. So if mom and dad can be connected, present, understanding, and there for their TCK throughout the journey, it's going to make a world of a difference. And of all factors, that might just be the most important. So along with having mom and dad, it's really important to have one or two other adults who love and care for the TCKs and are there for them. And so if you can have somebody from your team, somebody from your community, a friend, but somebody who is there and present in the TCK's life, an adult who's showing an interest in them, caring for them, understanding, and taking time to view the world through their lens and see what it looks like and what it feels like for them, and relating to them at that level, that can also make a world of a difference. Now, ideally, it would be somebody there with them in the country wherever they are, but it could also be one of the two. Could maybe be a grandparent or an uncle or aunt, somebody who's very connected, a godfather, etc., to that child, that TCK, and meeting with them regularly. So mom and dad, immediate family, just those adults in that core family who can really pour into them. And then two outside adults that can be from the community and also outside of the immediate area where they're living, as long as they're very much connected and present in an ongoing way in the TCK's life. Again, ideally, at least one of those would be local to where they live. Now, in addition to having those loving, caring adults in their life, another major deciding factor as to whether or not they're able to more easily get to the benefits and overcome the challenges is whether or not they connect with the local community where they're at, regardless of how many moves they have. The important thing is that they connect with the local community each place that they live. And so what the literature and research has found is if they get connected to the local community, they tend to look back in a favorable way on their stay in that country and at that location. And if they don't, it can be less likely that they have fond or favorable memories of that location. Also, there has been a connection to how well they do as an adult. And that's directly tied into how much they connected with the local community at each place they lived. Now, any kind of community obviously is going to be very helpful. So if you have a really strong expat community and they're very connected to that, that's great. That's going to be very helpful. But again, what I read in the literature and when I did my research in my master's is that the most helpful thing is that they get connected to the local community where they live, people who are originally from that country. Now, it could be that maybe there's a lot of expats right around where you live. If they get really connected to that community, that's also going to be very helpful. I should also add, the depth of the connection is going to directly correlate to a lot of the more positive outcomes. So the depth of their connection to mom and dad, the depth of their connection to that adult or two that's pouring into them, the depth of their connection to their immediate community around them. The depth is what's most important. So not just that they see people or that they interact with them, but they actually connect with them. And so it can be easy to try to check the boxes and make sure they're doing the right things. But much more important than just doing the right activities is making sure that a real, deep, life-giving, vulnerable, transparent connection is taking place in each of those different areas of their life, with their parents, with outside adults, and with the community around them. Another really helpful factor with TCKs is processing grief. And so we've talked about one of the challenges being the incredible amount of grief that TCKs experience and go through. And so if you can go back through and process that grief with them, or make sure that they connect with somebody else to help them do that, The important thing is that they process the grief. If they process the grief, a lot of those challenges can become benefits. And if they don't process through the grief, it's going to be really hard to get to the benefits because they're carrying that unprocessed grief along with them. And that's where a lot of the challenging outcomes come from. And so what can you do to process the grief? Well, they can connect with a counselor. They can connect with mom and dad or those caring adults or the community around them and share what it feels like for them to have lost grandparents, aunts, uncles, cousins, friends, their favorite animal, the school that they went to, their language, their culture. But the more that they can share and be open and transparent and vulnerable with the people in their lives, and the more that they can turn to God and share what they're feeling and ask for help from both God and the people around them, the more healthy they can be. So another thing that's important is making sure that you process grief as it comes. So not just what they've been through. Say their best friend is going to be moving back to the home country that they came from. That's going to be a real trial for them, something that they're really going to grieve. And so just taking time to work through that, not brush past it, not tell them it's going to be okay or that they're going to get another friend, but really dive into how are they feeling and how are they doing, and taking those emotions to God and asking God to help with that as well. That's going to be really important to process the grief, not just from the past, but current grief, and remain current. Now, it can be hard to get up to the current level of grief and have all past grief processed, but there's a lot you can do to get to that point. So one of the helpful illustrations to understand unprocessed grief is the grief tower timeline. Lauren Wells wrote about this in her book. The grief tower timeline, just imagine you're having stones of grief, a tower built of stones, and each block of grief gets put on top of each other. And eventually the tower gets to be so tall and so wobbly that it's going to fall. And so when we talk about some of the more serious consequences of unprocessed grief, those normally come about when you have a toppled grief tower. And so you can have PTSD, you can have complex PTSD, some of the much more serious things that you can face along your journey can come from a toppled grief tower. So how do we stop that from happening? If you can begin to evaluate, what are the blocks on my grief tower? And you build a timeline out from the time you can, beginning of your life, beginning of your journey of transition, and begin moving forward, and you look at what have been the blocks of grief in my life that have been most impactful. And you can go through the process of processing each of those blocks and removing them from your tower. You can take block by block and unbuild the tower and keep it at the ground level. It's not going to topple if you only have one or two blocks on it. And so doing this with a counselor, doing it with a TCK coach, TCK Training has some excellent family debriefs. There's a lot of organizations that you can go to get a good quality family debrief, or have your TCK go get a debrief. But debriefing what they've been through, talking through it, is a really great way to begin to work through each of those little blocks on their grief tower timeline. One of the other really helpful things to do is to review each year. And so once you've got your grief tower timeline caught up, and even before that point, at the beginning of each new year, looking back at the previous year and saying, what were the highs, what were the lows, what were the biggest blocks of grief and stress that you went through, the biggest challenges, what were the biggest outcomes that were positive and beneficial, how did you get to that? And as a family, processing all of these things each and every year at the beginning of the year, really working to look forward to the next year and say, what were the things that we could do better from last year? What were the things that we would change from last year and do different this coming year? And you can set yourself up for success each year, or at least an improved year from the previous year, as far as making the efforts that you can. Of course, outside factors can come in and affect that, but doing your part will make a difference. Okay, so what's another thing that you can do to help your TCK get through the challenges to the benefits? Well, one of the things you can do to really equip them for their journey is to work to build a godly character in them. If they have conscientiousness, generosity, thoughtfulness, a genuine care and concern for other people in their lives, these things can immensely help them along the way. And what you'll find is they'll make it through the challenges and the hardships a lot easier when they have these things in place at their core. So another thing you can do is just to help them know who they are. So who are they in Christ? What is their identity? Who did God make them to be? If you can help them maybe not answer all of these questions, but at least work towards feeling like they have a pretty good feel and idea of the answers to those questions. And they can find that in the Bible. So helping your TCK read the Bible regularly and know what the Bible says about them and their identity can make a world of a difference. One of the other tools that I found to be really helpful is working with your TCK to build an identity anchor. What is an identity anchor? Well, you can draw a little anchor on a piece of paper, but the really important part is that you ask them, what are the things about you that never change no matter where you're at? No matter what culture you're in, no matter which friends you're with, what are the things about you that never change? It might be that they're always laughing, always joyous. It might be that they're always thinking about the details. It might be that they love connecting with people. It might be that they love to stay active. Whatever those things are about your child, helping them recognize and identify them will help them have a solidified identity. Another really helpful thing you can do is help your TCK to connect with other TCKs. If there's no TCKs around them that they can get to know and connect with, there is an online global community of TCKs and adult TCKs all over the world. And so plugging in and connecting to other TCKs, hearing the same challenges and journey of other people around the world who can relate to them, who are going through very similar things, can be very, very life-giving to them. And in addition to connecting with other TCKs, being a part of a TCK processing group where they work through the challenges and grief together, or having a TCK coach that they meet with on a regular basis can also be immensely helpful along their journey. So the last major factor that we're going to talk about today in helping your TCK overcome the challenges and get to the benefits is transitioning well. Transition can be extremely difficult, and if you think about it, a lot of the stress that we experience in life comes from transition or change, and having to adapt to that change. And TCKs face change on a daily basis. Sometimes they face major changes that most other people don't go through. Transition can be a major source of stress. And so if you can help your TCKs transition well, chances are they're going to look back at their journey as being more enjoyable. If their transitions are really hard, they might look back at their journey as being a lot more stressful and painful. Now the good news is there is a lot that you can do to help your TCK transition well. And we're going to make an entire video just dedicated to that. The basic idea is to transition well, you transition intentionally. And so this can be challenging if it is an emergency or something outside of your control and it's a very rushed move. Maybe doing a little bit more grief processing is going to be needed than in other situations. But if you have time and you're able to do a lot of intentional preparation, the transitions can go a lot smoother and be a lot easier and more enjoyable. So I hope you enjoyed learning about some of these factors that can make a really major difference for your TCK in their journey of overcoming the challenges and getting to the benefits of being a TCK.